Thinking about all the creative skills, wondering if you can get blessed for them? Pause. Think about it with intentional thought and consider where we go from here. Tonight, we're thinking about creativity and whether the talents of our people can become enterprise right here in the 242. Because in the new built environment, creativity is not just culture and it's not just child's play, it's industry, it's innovation, and it's development. Pause. Let's think about it.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. What we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative, 242.
Welcome. Why am I two? Two of us, one of us, three. All right. Welcome, Jevon. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm in one piece, stand above the water line and below the bullet line.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah, man. I saw an old friend from work when I was at Taco for all them years today. And she said, man, I don't see you nowhere. And I told her that. Man, she was all over the food store floor. I was like, no, these people don't clean the floor like you clean house. So
That's good stuff.
yeah. Cool. Well, we're going to have an awesome conversation tonight. And so, like I said before, folks, Jevon Thompson is joining us. Jevon is a Bahamian visual artist whose work spans paintings, digital illustration, and emerging animation. That's what I like, the animation part. His creative practice explores storytelling, cultural memory, and the intersection of faith and creativity. That's powerful. Producing imagery that invites viewers to reflect on meaningful and connection. He earned the Associates of Fine Arts at the University of the Bahamas, that special institution, and a bachelor's in fine arts in visual arts from Emily Carr University of Arts, plus design, I guess that's part of the school name. Jevon has contributed to public murals initiated through the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas, helping bring art into everyday spaces of our communities. I think we're going to touch on that today also because that's very important. And he has also worked professionally as a graphic artist with Digiprint and Signs and Bahama Prints, which continue to expand his creative work into animation and digital storytelling. Welcome.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. So, as we mentioned, we're going to dive into a lot of stuff tonight, and we want to be able to help these young people in particular, and all of those who out there who feel that they don't have value in the Bahamas understand that their creativity is a significant value because you have proven that over and over again. And I don't know as much as I should know about you, but by the end of the show, I'm sure I can know way more than I do before we started.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Okay, so I need to go to the code. So, something to think about likes to put these thoughts in people's heads and so forth. And so this is for our audience. And we say, when Bahamian creativity becomes enterprise, talent stops leaving our shores and starts developing our nation. One man, one block at a time. And so we ask two questions of our audience. We said, what creative skills do you have that could become enterprise? And if every Bahamian developed their one block, their craft, their community, or space, how could that change the future of the Bahamas? So we want you to ponder those questions and ask whatever questions you have in the chat to this good gentleman on the screen. He got all kind of knowledge in his head. You see, he got hair on his head and I don't, so that means that all mine gone and he still got plenty. So, ask your questions. Tell us what you're thinking about and what you want the Bahamas to do. And we'll go from there. Cool, so let's go back to this. All right. So, Mr. T,
Yes.
I used to call people all kind of casual names. But I hope you don't one of those formal fellas. I don't know any artists who formal, but
No, not formal at all.
good to know. All right, so the first question is, let's start at the beginning. When did you first realize that your creativity, drawing, painting, storytelling, etc., was more than just a hobby or a child's play?
I would say probably my second year at the University of the Bahamas, so there was COB back then.
Okay.
I had made my first sale on a painting. And one of the lecturers there actually invested and bought the painting from me. And at that moment, it really clicked that, this is actually something that's possible. For a long time, when I was younger, especially in high school and things like that, people would discourage you from pursuing arts because it's like, it's an only income base after you pass away. So it felt a bit surreal to finally actually sell something in real time and see that this is actually something that's not just fun or something that I enjoy, but actually profitable.
Right. Yeah, well, that's good. Because, I guess they planted the seed and you wanted to make sure that you felt the value that you had in yourself and encourage you to go on so forward. Cool. All right, so your work explores storytelling, cultural memory, and faith. How do those elements influence the way you approach your art and your creative voice?
So I think people are always kind of searching for identity in some way, shape, or form. And I think for the most part, at least in the Bahamian landscape, it's been a bit difficult for us to kind of land on where we fit in the world in some cases because of how rich and I guess diverse our history is. There's so many people that have traveled to and from the islands, and we've had a lot of interactive history because of where we're placed geographically. And then similarly, being one of the countries in the world that's been colonized, there's a lot of integration between like faith, whether it's been Christianity or the religions passed down from our African ancestry and all these things. It's like, how do all these things interplay? And like, what does it really mean to be a Bahamian or someone that lives in this archipelago? So I've also had a personal vested interest in trying to make sure some of the oral history that we have kind of lives on in a modern way. Because personally, I've never heard any of the stories of like Babuki and Barabi and Bespider and all these things.
What?
Right. So when I was growing up, I never heard those stories. I never had a book about it. Those weren't things that I was privy to. So once I started to learn a lot more about like Bahamian mythology, it's like, well, how can I contribute to this element of culture and make sure, the people like me who might have never heard these stories still get to have, that opportunity, and to also maybe get to see more imagery and things like that exist in the space, because there's a ton of stuff out there on Greek mythology, there's a ton of stuff out there on Roman mythology, there's Brazilian and all these other things. Like, there's a lot of mythology out there that has a lot of imagery and sculpture and things that exist, but ours, it's very, at least to me, very limited. So it's like I feel like it should be something that's a lot more commonly talked about and commonly known, and something that's just very, very integrated into just the education and the visual landscape.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because Bookie and Marabi is one of the stories or the series that actually kept me focused in school. My mom won't say I was focused because I didn't pay attention in school, in high school. So, you know, but the mere fact that you mentioned all of those other things, because, you know, there's the thing that says that, you know, what is in our books is the reflective of what the hunter does. You know, the story of the hunter always is the ones which is recorded, whereas, you know, the hunted don't. And, you know, for the longest we were hunted. And Bookie and Marabi, for me, was a time when I was growing up when a lot of people had challenges with their identity in terms of what was black, right? Somebody like me was considered white to a lot of people. My siblings and friends, you know, we used to tease everybody, talking about, oh, you know, he's the white boy and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, but us within ourselves, but when it came to other people, then they know, you know, we all stood up for each other.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But I say that to say because one of the things was with the Bookie and Barabi and the color and the animation of the animals, etc. You know, we always used to call each other names. You know, this one looks like that and that and stuff. And so you got to identify with something. And I think we are missing that in today's child growing up. Yeah, the video games are good. They do teach you a lot of other things, but in terms of that component. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. It's like, and that's part of kind of why I want to at least revive a lot of the visual language that relates to those ideas, because I don't think it should be that difficult for Bahamians to access that information. And in trying to like research and find like more articles or written word or anything really to kind of give more visual language to what these things are, I think it would help, you know, a lot of Bahamians like find a rooted identity in things that are coming from us, you know, stories that come from us, things that are related to what we see and what we do, you know, related to Junkunu, related to the landscape and the flora, related to things that actually matter to the people, and not so much, you know, what kind of spills over from, you know, America or any other larger force in the world that we kind of have to, I don't want to say bend to, but accommodate in a lot of ways, especially with like tourism and a culture that kind of forces you to be very accommodative to larger parties to kind of keep the economy. You know, how could we now find things that are, you know, native to us, but that would draw the attention of others, so we don't have to kind of put on a show, but just show the world that, you know, this is who we are and this is what we represent, and that be enough to draw them, you know.
Right. Well, many people, young people in particular, are creative, but don't always seem to know it becomes a career, or how it could become a career. When did you realize that the creative skills could actually become enterprise?
I think through university. I think a lot of the reason why, like my parents or some people in the older demographic would be a bit apprehensive about like encouraging their kids to do something in the arts is because they kind of had a very narrow-minded view of what's possible. And so like my parents, well, my mom would have said, you know, when you paint or when you do sculpture, these things, like you don't really make money until after you die, because that's their experience. They only knew of art in that kind of particular niche.
Right.
And I think for a while, and even a little bit presently, but I think the landscape is changing. But I think largely locally, that still kind of holds in the sense that the most of the artwork that we see here has been kind of within the same sort of mediums of, you know, painting or sculpture or something of that nature, or like a niche between the two. But we haven't actually seen how expansive creative careers really get. You know, you have like script writers and makeup and set designers and animators, and you have colorists and VFX artists, and you have like all of these different things that comprise a lot of the things that we enjoy in entertainment. Like,
Right.
someone is responsible for finding the right angles for the shows that you love to watch. Someone is responsible for the color grading. Someone's responsible for the costuming. Someone is responsible for the makeup and the set design. Someone is responsible for the concept art. Someone is responsible for storyboarding the movies and the TV shows and the anime. Like that, there are a lot of areas of creativity that span a lot larger than just painting and sculpture. And I think that Bahamian culture could do well with capitalizing on all of those creative areas that we don't really pay much attention to, and it can expand the culture in a beautiful way. So I think university helped in that it exposed me to more than just painting and sculpture, and it also opened my eyes to just how important creativity is to almost every field out there.
Right.
So no matter whether it's medicine to engineering, like there's still some sort of a creative aspect to all these things that requires the presence of a creative person.
Yeah, Peter F. Drucker always talked about it from the point of view that he said it's only two things that is important, pretty much the rest are cost, and that is innovation and marketing, and that's in relation to business. And so, yes, if we want to make this our creativity an enterprise, then there are two key things that you mentioned so far. And I know I've learned that more so than anything else is in producing the show. That you need way more hands to do focus work than what one man trying to do everything yourself. And Lord help, if something go wrong, then you get distracted from what you really here to do, which is to do the part we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Right? And so forth. Cool. Well, that's also important because like I said to my friend who was on the show, Michael Armagon, with the esports scenario, that's an ecosystem by itself of business entities, whether it's lawyers, this, that, what have you. So I think, like you said, we shortchange ourselves in the creative environment in a big way because we think it's just one of those small pieces of somebody slapping some paint on the canvas, which is what a lot of people think it is, and it's not stroking or curating a piece or whatever. And just for honesty, not honesty, but for it's gonna be my son Dominique Knowles is an artist, and my cousin John Cox is an artist. I'm sure you know John.
Yeah.
You might not know Dominique, and then good friend Toby. Glenn. Yeah. So I get a little bit of stuff rub off of them onto me into my head. I can't draw. I didn't with a ruler, but but that's that.
Yeah.
So the orange economy now, because in this show, our idea is to build our nation and to help people understand that there's more to being a doctor, lawyer, accountant. And I find that Bahamians are very creative, and it's proven when you see people go into jungle shacks.
Yeah.
But we don't tap into it. So to me, the upskilled or the capacity or the pent-up demand in our orange economy is huge, where we can do. So if we're talking about the orange economy, creativity as economic activity, how real is the opportunity today for Bahamians, young and elderly, to earn a living through creative industries? So the machinery of it and everything, what's out there? What help people understand how they could, if they do something creative, how they could get that to flip back into some.
I think it's pretty real. I think some of the only roadblocks I've really run into is like certain things require you to have like an American bank account or something of that nature to like use certain online shopping and shipping options, like Etsy, for example.
Right.
Etsy is a popular place where people kind of sell their handcrafts and all these kind of things online, and you would kind of be responsible for your own shipping handling, but it gives you your own sort of online shop. And one of the, I guess, blockages would be that, it requires, at least at the time that I was trying to use it, it would require a American bank account. So that would be that, and I think the shipping would be part of a little bit of a headache for someone here trying to, I guess, like sell their work beyond just Bahamian shores.
Right.
But outside of that, I also think that, because tourism is a very important part of our society as it exists currently, there are still ways to kind of use certain things to your advantage, in the sense of, I've done or helped out with people doing like, pop-up weddings. So people that are coming off the cruise ship and they want to have a small ceremony in the beach, and you have the opportunity to like set up a small little arch or whatever to get that process going. I think that's that kind of pocket is something that's
Right.
available. There's also, I think, a lot more people, especially with the advent of like TikTok and social media, are now seeing the need or value of marketing. And a lot of companies are now open to having people come on board to help them deal with their marketing on I guess, on a contractual basis. So it still gives you a lot of freedom to, do what you need to do, but you're able to come in and assist in that regard. I also think people are becoming more aware of art in the sense here locally that is not just pretty pictures, but there's also a strong cultural and conversative and educational value to it as well, where
Right.
it's like, it's not just making pretty pictures, but you're telling stories, or you're using visual language to say things that you might not exactly have the words to convey. And people are now realizing that there are creative people that are able to do these things, and I can trust them to do that, as opposed to trying to go the easy way out, which I think is also a little bit interesting now that AI has entered the ring, so to speak. Yeah. So like, I think a lot of people have seen, most people are opting to use AI to make their flyers and things like that recently. And I think it's good in the sense that it gives people entry into that sort of space, but simultaneously, I also think it's now showing people, I guess, the importance of what a graphic designer and illustrator does in the process of having a human touch in certain things.
Right.
And with Junkanoo, like we brought up, I think Junkanoo is also a very untapped resource, in the sense that, it's something unique to our cultural expression. And I think a lot of the Caribbean countries that were colonized around us have a similar sort of festival that looks a lot like Junkanoo, but each of us do it or present it in a very different way. And we, I think, do ourselves a little bit of a disservice by not kind of leaning into the uniqueness of what makes our expression of that festival very unique to the Bahamas.
Right.
Also, like finding ways to continue to innovate, in the sense of, a problem we have with Junkanoo costumes is longevity, in the sense of, if we wanted to like sell a costume or transport it overseas, like the costumes are made of, the rude word of Junkanoo, crepe paper and cardboard and things that over time will be susceptible to deterioration. So we, at least as far as I know, haven't found a way to preserve those materials to give them like a longer lifespan. So if somebody wanted to like have a sculpture of Junkanoo items, that might not necessarily be possible, because after a certain amount of time, the color of the crepe paper is going to fade. It can't get wet. Cardboard is susceptible to being eaten away by insects or dry rot, or whatever it is. So, how do we now fill that stopgap, so now we can now open up the market for Junkanoo to be something that's internationally viable? Or how can we now also, I think, assist the men and women that are in the shacks doing what they do, in the sense that, I don't think you would kind of rob them of their creativity or uniqueness by creating a facility that is able to house them properly, in the sense that, they're in the shacks for hours and hours on end. They're not seeing their family. They're not, it's a long, arduous process to produce this beautiful festival that you get to participate in at the end of the year. And I think it would create the opportunity for them to be fairly compensated for their work. And it also not just feel like, you do all this work and at the end of the year, just because you didn't like place in the parade, nobody gets anything.
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit unfair to the people that are still working hard to produce, these beautiful pieces of artwork that exist in the space. So I've been really pondering on that and how that can become its own sort of pocket for other creators, and also what people might not consider as artwork, but it's still artwork, like the men and women that do like cabinetry and things of that nature, woodworking.
Right.
I've seen a lot of people now take it up a notch in terms of, they're giving you personalized designs, or they're using wood burning tools, and they're doing a lot of things to give a personal touch to a lot of the, what would you, I guess, consider regular parts of your household experience. But that kind of makes your house more of a home when you have a personalized touch to it. So I think there are areas like that where you could kind of breach the market. There's also like cards and things of that nature. So we have like Poinciana Paper Press that's like doing really new and innovative things with making cards and calligraphy and all this kind of stuff. And of course, teaching is always going to have its place. And at least in my experience going to university, at least here, I don't remember being taught the like fundamentals or like foundation steps of like, this is how you use oil paint, or this is how you do this, and yada, yada, yada. We were kind of taught the other element of creativity in the sense of you are kind of responsible for your own direction, and you kind of figure it out as you go, which I think is helpful in the sense of giving you autonomy, but it doesn't necessarily teach you skills that you could then use to do whatever you need to do. And I think that that's also a really viable marketplace in terms of teaching people techniques and fundamentals that are very important to how you create artwork effectively, and then allowing them to then branch off from there once they get the foundation, and yeah, I think there's a lot to branch into. And film has become really popular too. We've had a few Bahamian filmmakers like produce really high quality films, I think, within the last 4 or 5 years. I think that's also now a lucrative avenue in the sense of you're now able to again tell stories and do things from a unique Bahamian perspective, but also with very good cinematic and high quality video that is now showing people that we have the creativity and the skill set to produce things at this level. So what's stopping us from having the next Bahamian TV show or the next Bahamian animated series or whatever else that pushes the boundary of what's possible in the islands?
Yeah, and on the point that with the film, we also have it not in just that, but maybe even producing like the sports games and so forth, because a lot of times when we look on TV, you can't hear nothing. You can see this pretty big picture, but you're wondering what you're hearing, and you're wondering, if the people really throw away them cable that have been around from when I was there, or not, kind of thing. But so there's so much available on the table for people to tap into and to grow and strain. And you mentioned AI. I love AI, but I don't love AI for everything. I love AI for the things that I need quickly, fast, and efficiently. That doesn't really have emotion, but for paintings and stuff like that, which I want to convey a story in my soul, etc. I still want the original artist, the real artist. I shouldn't say the real artist because AI is an artist of sorts, but the live artist. Yes, because you see their life into their work, kind of thing, right? So forth. All right, so we often talk about the new built environment.
Mhm.
And if I could find a new built environment for you, I don't know if you. I s- where did did I load it? Maybe I didn't load it. Yeah, I loaded it. Yeah, so that's the new built environment on screen. But so we often talk about the new built environment which we're trying to create. And this was born out of COVID when people kept talking about the new normal. And I'm like, no, it's not the new normal. We don't want a new normal. We don't want more of the same. We want to craft and script and sculpture what environment we want.
Mhm.
And so that's when I came up with this definition of what the new built environment is. And it's based on 5 pillars, which are based on sun, sound, sea, people, and digital. And sun, they're all industries or light industries in most part. We
Mhm.
talk about the film industry and stuff like that. All that will come out of one of those pillars right there. The sun, all of the energy stuff out in the sky with the sun and
Mhm.
the sea and land and all that. So all of that, I believe, we could easily build $100 billion economy. Right now, let's say we are 10, a
Mhm.
little more than 10, but multiplying that by 10 to me is easy. But we seem to think big numbers. We get scared of big numbers, right? But since I had Captain Prescott Smith on and some other people, Lester Cox, the ambassador, etc., His Excellency, all of those guys talk about my 100 billion is a joke compared to what we have available in the Bahamas from a resource point of view.
Yeah.
And that's not even including the people resource which you're talking about. All right. So what's your perspective on what our people could do
Um,
in terms of building economy from our people's skills, etc.?
as far as like people and creativity are concerned, I think
Yeah.
that we can contribute in the sense of providing stories and authentic experiences that paint the Bahamas in a true light of its culture and not necessarily, I guess, something that's been pushed out there primarily for consumption.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of the like tourist marketing and things of that nature have a lot to do with pandering to what they think tourists want to see,
Mm-hmm.
and making a very agreeable and accommodating culture that caters to whatever the desire of the guest is, but not necessarily provide them with an authentic experience of culture in the sense of I don't know how real or true it is that Bahamians smile all the time and they're so welcoming and accommodative, or is that just because we know that we need tourism and we have to be that way all the time, kind of thing, or how we prepare our food or present other things. Like we don't need to dumb down what culture is just to accommodate for someone else. Like let them come and experience it, and then take that experience with them as they go back to where they come from, or to enjoy what it is that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And for us to not to be afraid to express certain things um, as Bahamians without fear of this might not sell or people might not be interested, because I think a lot of, at least in the tourist market, you kind of see a lot of the same thing where it's like there's always a beach scene, there's always a palm tree, there's always a flamingo, there's always these things that
Ponciana, don't forget the Ponciana tree.
Poinciana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things that are um, commonly accepted as what tourists want to see and want to consume. And I think it's up to the Bahamian people to then flood the market with, this is the Bahamian perspective on this, or this is what it's like to live in this area, or this has been my experience with these things, and now I can form opinion or tell a story from that as a Bahamian and then give that to them. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it would still be rich and new and vibrant in the market, as opposed to just giving a rinse and repeat of the same old, same old. It'll feel like an authentic experience. Um, Also, kind of getting away from um, like fast fashion and fast like commodities, like you buying a dray load of things from China and then slapping a Bahamian flag on top of it.
Right.
Like how many things are actually authentically being made from here, or like using natural resources, or even going back to Junkanoo, when the root of Junkanoo was using found items. Nobody is making sponge costumes anymore. Nobody is using newspaper, like the gigantic fringing. Like nobody's using found material in the same way, which I think is a integral part of what the culture of Junkanoo should be about, and I think that's getting lost in translation. And I don't think innovation needs to be separate from, where things began. Like there are still ways to innovate and continue to grow while still not losing sight of what made the thing beautiful in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the people can contribute in that way, and also kind of keeping certain things alive. Like I talked about, like the oral culture, I think you'd be surprised how much people might be interested in hearing about the stories that we have around the island, hearing about the Luska, hearing about the Chicharni, hearing about Babuki and Barabi, hearing about all these things, and will kind of ground you in the culture and to help you understand a bit more about who we are, like the problems that we face or how we've overcome them and things of that nature. So I think that's how the people can contribute. And I don't think it would be so far-fetched of an idea to imagine a Bahamas that has its own local TV broadcasting network, that has its own companies that produce, TV shows, that produce movies, that have, well-known actors. Like we've had a Sidney Poitier, but when have we had anyone since? How come we don't have our own film industries and things of that nature? How come we don't have our own ability to produce streaming platforms and services? Like it's beautiful and like amazing to me. Like sometimes when you go on Netflix and you have access to French movies and Russian movies and German movies and all these other people that are producing films and really good films. And what about us? I'm sure we have a voice and we have a lot of things to say and a very unique, creative view of the world. So why not?
Yeah. But we have the Daniel Meneses and the Nevado Stubbses and etc. So I don't think it's a capacity issue. I just think we're not giving it intentional thought and purpose and action. Right?
Agreed.
And to your point, my mom ran a guest house, a bed and breakfast for many years in Chippenham. And most of the guests that came there stayed with her, went to the family islands, and then came back and stayed a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
And they came because they wanted exactly what you was just asking, and they said they don't find that in Nassau, so they're not staying in Nassau, right? And they're not going to the big hotels, but the big hotels aren't pushing any of that authentic culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they like staying at the guest house, because they get to live with a family, because she used to live there at the time, etc. And all of that. So those are all niches that we need to develop in a big way, right? Because people have tapped into these things, peace, but we need momentum in these spaces to get. And like I mentioned just now, I don't think we have a capacity issue, so our talent exists in abundance. I've always said that in anything, especially anything kinetic or visual or creativity's point of view, those things we are top notch in the world in. I don't think we run short of that. And so, but the opportunity can appear limited for the reasons you just mentioned. What kinds of support platforms and infrastructure would help Bahamian creatives build sustainable careers?
So I was recently, I'm still a part of a program called the Elevate Art program that was specifically dedicated towards teaching Bahamian creatives and artists how to market their work digitally and how to kind of reach the market in that way. So they're not exactly limited to just local markets, but they're able to sell their work online and to understand how that works. So NFTs work, how to market, how to copyright, how to do all these things. Right. So I think initiatives like that are really great and really vital to helping creatives to not only protect themselves and protect their work, but to also look beyond the archipelago to, not just sell here, but to sell to the world at large,
Right.
and to find buyers and communities and things of that nature everywhere and not just here. I think education is also important too. So like I touched on how important it is to know the foundation. So I'm very grateful that I had lecturers that taught elements of color theory and also taught how to, find your own voice and like work from what you feel and what you want to say. But I also think that there was a lack in terms of like the technical aspect of the training, in terms of like, what is this brush used for? What's the difference between using a synthetic brush versus using a natural hair brush? Or how does the way that you apply paint change the way your stroke looks? Or what about mediums to add to the paint? Or certain kind of skill sets that were vital to, art schools and like the Renaissance era and all the stuff that helped them become very technically skilled, which then also allowed them to break the rules because they already knew the rules to begin with, so they knew how to do an underpainting, and they knew how to mix colors, and they knew how to judge perspective, and they spent a lot of time doing those things. And I think that as far as a resource that might not necessarily cost you money per se, but giving people the time to hone those sorts of skills, because anything creative or artistic doesn't happen overnight. It isn't that quick per se. And you can build speed over time, but again, time is still a factor. You need to practice, you need to learn, you need to experience, and to do all sorts of things. So I think another area of support is also being realistic and a bit more accommodating in terms of allowing the creatives to grow and experiment and try out their skills, and that's something that you don't necessarily need to invest dollars in per se, but just invest time. Give them the opportunity to make a mistake, or to try something new, or to practice this thing for long enough to become a master at it, and be a bit forgiving in that process, because nobody started anything the first time and was the best at it,
Right.
So, I think that's another good way of support as well. And I think better governmental or organizational efforts to like making spaces for that to happen. So like how I mentioned the Junkanoo aspect. I know that there's been a lot of pushback from like the JCNP as of recently because of the government's initiative to be more involved in the Junkanoo process.
Right.
And while I might understand a bit of why they might be apprehensive, I still think it would be very good to have the backing of the actual Bahamian government for a Bahamian cultural thing, because now, you can possibly lobby for the building of actual Junkanoo facilities, where now you have the opportunity to teach people how to paste costumes, teach them how to build costumes, teach them how to use wire. And now you have a way to create an educational system that's also able to fund people in careers. So now I can become a Junkanoo crafting teacher. I could become a pasting teacher. I could become a choreographing teacher. Like, you have the opportunity to open up the market in that sense, to help this become something that gives people the opportunity to be compensated for their skills, but two, also continuously perpetuate a culture over and over. So now you don't have to worry about who's going to be the next person choreographing for this particular group when this person dies, or this person has an injury, or whatever have you. Or you don't have to worry about, there's only 2 or 3 people able to paste the costume at the skill level, when you have someone that's teaching something that's now a part of the bedrock of society.
Right.
So I think that that's also a good way to support. Because even while I was at the College of the Bahamas, for example, a lot of our facilities that were made for the arts weren't kept very well. So the ceramics room, for example, was like a walking hazard. There were chemicals and materials in there that should be kept and, organized and stocked in a certain way, but it's in a, Roundup is falling apart. So we were liable to, you know, be harmed, as far as our health is concerned, because nobody cared enough to invest in this thing that you're also benefiting from, because, we're making ceramics and we're making these things. And then that's also its own market, because, now you could have Bahamian tile makers, you could have Bahamians making your bowls and your plates and your Tupperware. So again, it's like there's a market in there for us to also be artisans and be more self-sufficient in that regard. But because we're not thinking about creativity and art in that kind of way, we kind of, shoot ourselves in the foot, and there's so much you could do, like making carpet. I have people that are interested in rug making, and you could imagine how much like a roll of carpet costs. Now imagine you have people making custom made rugs for you that are made by, Bahamian artisans and craftsmen and craftswomen, so there are so many ways you could, invest in the creativity that's already sitting here that I think we're kind of missing. But off the top of my head, that's what I think is really important.
And that's great, because I mean I think I counted at least 7 or 8 major compartments that people could develop. And so, and when we say develop, we always put pressure on the government to do certain things, right? But the private sector needs to step up, not just the I don't want to say status quo, the ones who doing it all the time now, but more of the private sector, and get involved in these things. Because when we knocked down the post office, I suggested to the government to make that a campus and a nightlife space. So the campus would be an extension of the University of the Bahamas, or COB, where we would do teaching of the whole detailed stuff, from the craft building straight through to how the skill to go to Bay Street and the strategies, the whole thing. So people coming off the cruise ship could go there and spend probably their 4 hours the day off and be totally engulfed in culture, right? And the like. But we wanted to put a central bank there. So, what happened to that idea. But I don't give up. So, I keep pressing it to everyone who come, and hopefully at some point, some will change somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. To make it happen and stuff. But you have people like the Sir Franklins and the rest of those who have some money beyond what we ever dream of when we was growing up. So I know he does a lot with the university now, but there got to be more of him out there who's just not doing anything with their money, other than watching it grow. Right? You could turn it over, develop it, invest in your people, and so forth. All right, so that's our talent, which we know we're talent. So art community now, right? You've contributed to public mural projects. What role can art play in transforming communities, body, mind, and soul, and how people experience their environment? Because I always feel that one of the biggest low-hanging fruit that we have in the Bahamas, and particularly Nassau, is our drive to work, whether you're going on the bus or the taxi or in your own car. That drive is an experience that puts you from being hyped for 100% productivity or 120% productivity down to about 60, 70 before you even get into the people job. Right? And I'm just thinking stuff like murals and other things that people identify with will help ease those drives.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on stuff like that?
I would agree, because Miami has like the Windward District, and you have these areas that are like specifically dedicated for like creative spaces. Like there's a plethora of art galleries and T-shirt shops and like any sort of art form you could think of. But the areas themselves are also well decorated by artists. You have artists that are paid by business owners to paint a mural on their space, and it now gives you the opportunity to not just make the area more visually appealing while you're driving through, but also to tell stories and to do different things. So like what they did with Pompeii, for example, instead of them just painting it the regular government pink, they allowed the artists to give Pompeii right, a good facelift, and I think it really opened up the space. And now not only is the museum providing you with history, but it's also visually attractive to look at. Like, you're more inclined to go inside because you're like, okay, what's really going on here, kind of thing. And if we allowed for a little bit more creativity in that regard with, some of our spaces or our most traveled pathways, I think it would allow for a lot more people to feel, differently. Like, even if I might wake up on one morning and I don't feel 100% and I'm driving along this pathway that's really engaging and beautiful, that might give me the extra push to, try a little harder that day. Right. Or even just with community engagements, like I've done a lot of murals around town, and it's also allowed me the opportunity to kind of like engage and meet with people. So we were doing a mural before on Lewis Street, myself and a few other students at the time, and we were able to like engage with one of the Haitian churches in the area, because they'd see us there like on Sundays and we're painting. Like, they came to say hi and they brought us food and things of that nature, and it allowed for a cultural exchange, but also just a human moment, or having the opportunity to, like, the NAGB does this summer camp, and you have the opportunity to allow the kids to get engaged with the mural. And that's a good way to show them that, you have opportunities to, work with gallery spaces and do these sorts of things if there's something you're interested in. And also the opportunity to educate tourists, because the museum is in the area where they're going to be able to see it. And now you have the opportunity to paint a mural in an area to attract them to the space, or to give them a little bit of history without them even knowing they're learning history. Or to raise awareness for certain things. Like, I did a mural about Coral World, and not many people know what Coral World was, or why it's still there, and why nobody's done anything with it. It's just a big, gigantic, eyesore at this point that nobody's bothered to do anything about. So it gives you the opportunity to talk about ecology, or to talk about the importance of our ecosystems in the water, mangroves, and all these other things. And even the Ranfully Home, we did a mural there once before too, and we were able to engage the kids, and you'd be surprised, how helpful it was for them to just be engaged in a project that helped make the place that they were staying feel a little bit more like home. And also just to connect to people outside of just being inside the space. So, it allows us to have those sort of community moments where we get to engage with people that we might not ever really get to talk to or interact with on a regular basis, but also invite them into the process. So now that you're actually participating in a mural, that, okay, this is actually a lot more difficult than just, oh, I could paint my child could do this, or my brother could do this. Like, no, not really. This is a lot more well thought through and complex than you might think, and a lot more goes into it. And when you actually participate, you're like, oh, I have a little bit more respect for what these people do.
Right. Yeah, and that's the key I was just gonna say, because it's not that they really can't do, it's just that they need the guidance to be able to lift out that gift that they have. All right. And so, seeing that we're talking about one man, one block, right? Because I always believe that if we do our part, then as a whole, then we will be able to develop. But if we're trying to do everybody else's part, we're not put on this earth to do other people's part, right? So, have you seen an example where one creative person transformed a space and inspired others to help elevate a community?
Um, I guess I could kind of speak personally in that I think myself and a lot of other people are inspired by the likes of like Oliver Monroe or
Okay. Yeah.
Alan Wallace, in the sense that these are two pillars that were able to really shake the art community and like work as artists solely and like have a huge impact, or even
Right.
like an Anina Major or a Kendra Fora, other like two other powerhouses in the art community that are able to inspire other up and coming artists to say like there's a space for us here, and you're not just limited to the islands or the archipelago, and also you're able to follow the creative thing that was built inside of you and like actually see it come to fruition. Like Alan has done murals all across the island, and he's in high demand. LeVar Monroe, I remember
Yeah.
we helped him out one time, and he had like almost 3 or 4 shows happening at the same time in different places all around the world. I was able to help Anina Major in NAGB like assemble a sculpture that went from the floor straight up to the ceiling, and she and Kendra Forup are like making waves beyond just the islands and archipelago, and
Right.
they are individuals, but their impact has gone way beyond just themselves. They're able to inspire communities, inspire others that you can do these things, and they have been very like welcoming to teach and to accommodate and to invite people in. And I think that's really important as well, is like when you achieve what you achieve, it's not just about achieving it for achieving its sake, but also how you're able to give back and sow seeds, and in some ways allow your ceiling to be the floor from somebody else.
Cool. So if more Bahamians creatives invested their talents into their one block, how could that help develop the new built environment across the communities? So we have a sustainable life where we have quality of life. What would that artist or the creative impact be? Or what do you project it could be?
I think it could be really ground shaking in that we have the opportunity to create a culture that passes down a lot of things, so we could kind of avoid the stopgap of when this person dies, this thing is never going to exist ever again.
Right.
And I think we see a lot of that with certain elements of like straw weaving, for example. I don't know if there's still a lot of people that still participate in straw weaving, and it would be very unfortunate to see that part of culture die out, or we talked a lot about like androgen print, and coming to the realization that androgen print isn't necessarily Bahamian, so to speak, but to even like kind of use that as the building blocks to now create Bahamian fashion, or like pass down the art of making these kinds of fabrics and things like that. We have a lot of crafting and things here that are things that we can pass down to make sure the process continues. So I think if with that in mind, there are probably a ton of Bahamians out there that have the knowledge or the desire or the skill set to want to start something and then bring culture into it. And in becoming or putting your block in there allows for others to continue to build on top. We could have our own versions of like a Nehemiah that's building the wall, but it's the collective work of multiple people doing what they do, and inviting others in or training others, and not being afraid of teaching in that sense of you might meet someone that might be able to improve what you're doing or do it in a different way and not be afraid of advancement in that way, because now people feel like, or, I'm not going to be as important, or nobody's going to buy my stuff anymore. There's not going to be any more space for me. And it's like, that's not how community or innovation works, and I think that creatives can continue to exist and their value is always going to be there, because um, there's just a unique way to communicate and to connect through all sorts of visual and creative arts. And even at the root of it, one of the first mentioned times in scripture of someone receiving power from the Holy Spirit is a guy named Bezalel, who was commissioned to, build the temple and all of its accoutrements. So it's like there's a very deep rooted spiritual aspects of the creative process as well, because we are in the image and likeness of God, who is our creator, and by extension we are also creatives that want to echo back to our creator in that way. So I think it's always going to be space for us here and space for us to continue to grow and put our block, like you say, for us to build our proverbial wall in the space.
Awesome. So the other day, you did some work with Dion Cunningham and his group and his launch of, I guess, his album, etc. And I have never seen nobody in real life fingers move as fast as that in my life. But that's a serious thing.
Yeah.
It's pianos and that was brothers. When the video comes out, whenever, do go and watch it, because that's a Bahamian brother who at one level out this world, right? But you produced some stuff on the screen from an animation point of view, etc. That I thought was top notch, right? And from then I've been trying to save up a couple of dollars so that I could rebrand my show in terms of real animation, which is what I wanted from day one. But just anyway, that's for another day. So, but your work expanding into the digital illustration and animation. How do digital tools allow Bahamian creatives to reach audiences beyond our shores and even here? Because I watch these children in church on their iPads. Yeah, on their iPads, not parents' iPads. And when I say children, I talk about like 5, 6, 7-year-olds and stuff like that. And they be doing some animation games and whatever else. I'm thinking that's a space that maybe it's not used. Some Bahamians could get into. What's your thoughts on that whole process?
I agree. I'm trying to, as you were talking, I was trying to recall the name of the Bahamian animated film that came out recently. But we have others in the space that are like working towards bringing that into the forefront.
Okay.
And like for me, I've always been inspired by anime in general, and also just being able to bring that into the Bahamian context, because it might not necessarily be us making things that are like literal one-to-ones with Bahamian culture, so to speak, but to have a Bahamian give perspective to a life issue or things like that, and be the one or be the hand that's creating the thing, is also still a milestone or a leap or bound for us locally, and to like make it expansive. We can see through TikTok and Instagram and social media that you can literally never know what's going to be that one moment that kind of sparks everything, and it gives you the space to create and now connect with people all around the world that you might not have ever had the opportunity to do so in times previously. So while it might be a bit discouraging sometimes locally working where that you have the skills, or you want to explore a thing, and it doesn't seem like anybody within the local context cares as much or values what you do, you now also have the opportunity to showcase your work in a digital space that now gives you reach beyond the waters. But simultaneously, I also know that there's a reality of um, you might have to just work a little bit harder because of, again, where we are located geographically. Like some people would notice that when you go to make purchases on certain websites, or you try to do certain things, like the Bahamas doesn't even pop up in the list of countries that's available inside their, database, or because of where you're posting from, you might not get as much reach as if you had posted the same thing from an America or from a France or wherever else.
Right.
Because the algorithm caters to certain other IP addresses over others, and yada yada yada.
Right.
And it even shows up in like gaming and other things. Whereas like if you have to pick a region where you're from for playing a game, and it kind of matches you with people from the same region, you only get to see like North America, Central America, Europe, Asia, so forth. But you never get to see the Caribbean, and we're kind of like lumped together, I guess, with like a North America or a South America or whatever. I think that's one of the hurdles that could be a bit challenging. But outside of that, I still think that there's still ways for us to get out there, even as simple as like a Miss Rachel, for example. Like, I don't know what her start was, but it's blossomed into something that's making Miss Rachel a ludicrous amount of money. And what's stopping a Bahamian from becoming the Bahamian version of Miss Rachel if there isn't one already? And now you have Bahamians in the market that are doing the same thing and like generating wealth and income and all these things from something that's not a traditional kind of work experience, but allows them to get themselves out there and do something creative that continues to funnel and spread over. So yeah, I think the digital world offers a lot of opportunity, but at the same time, it's not as simple as you make your best painting today and post it tomorrow and you go viral. Like it's not an easy one-to-one. For some people it works that way, and for others it's like it takes 5 years, it takes 10 years, it takes so there's elements of that, but there's also other ways that you can reach the market by finding companies that handle certain things for you. So like if you want to get into making t-shirts or branding material or whatever it is, there are companies that handle their shipping and the making of the product for you, and all you have to do is supply a design. So there are a whole lot of ways to get yourself out there and to use the digital global market to your advantage.
Yeah, and the government actually has a number of machinery, mechanisms, etc., that help people with a lot of those things. So from that perspective, I guess you can keep them. But you want to keep government at bay now. You don't need them too much in your business, right? And so forth. So there's still hope for me, because I used to eat a lot of crayons in primary school, and so forth. So, and my whole career was on digital, building a digital environment, etc., and all of that. So you just give me hope. So forth. So if we truly invest in the people pillar and develop the orange economy, what could the creative future of the Bahamas look like in the next 10 to 20 years? What size economy you project that could be?
It could be limitless, so I think something that people would be like really familiar with is like, Stranger Things had its like last season on Netflix earlier this year or last year or whatever.
Okay.
And the money they spent alone on like marketing and like set design was in the millions almost, so it's like there's space for the economy to grow in that sense, where if we're doing productions and things on that scale, that now also creates new careers and new availabilities for people. So it's like, it's no longer as simple as, you go into, BTVI or whatever to get your certification in cosmetology and being a nail tech or whatever. Now that could branch even further into you're now doing makeup and costuming for like creature design or
Right.
whatever the set piece is for this movie or our plays. We're also getting a more rich culture in terms of plays or like live music and things of that nature. And um, Pirates of the Caribbean, like another very familiar movie or series that's well known. The composer Hans Zimmer, that's responsible for a lot of the music in the Pirates of the Caribbean movie. That music became very iconic, and he got paid a pretty penny to compose those songs. So now we have like spaces like that for we talked about Dion, and there's like other um, musicians and like people that are up and coming that have or would be able to have the space to do certain things, where people are now creating films or creating whatever it is, and they now want a personalized score for that film, or to even go further into like more regular everyday to day things. Like people are now live streaming and like doing podcasts like this or like doing other things, and you're now putting your work in a digital space now where people have copyrights and you can't use their music and you can't do certain things. So now you now have a space for people to create music that's specific to you, so you don't have to worry about copyright, you don't have to worry about all these other things. You have opening doors for imagery, because like a thing that was a big problem for me as a graphic designer, and a lot of my other graphic designer friends could attest, is that it's very difficult to find assets when you're making like Bahamian advertisements or whatever it is, or just generally if you're trying to like find assets of like Black people in certain scenarios, you very unlikely to find exactly what you're looking for. And then to not trickle that down to more Bahamian specific things is very difficult to find high quality assets of photos or images of like kung salad, or someone having a good time on a particular beach, or a sands or a collect or whatever it is. Like we don't have assets for those kind of things for people within the design pool to use them. So there's also like a market in that regard for photographers to not just be doing portraiture or other things, but also to get into product photography, or to get into doing these other things that then also makes you passive income, because now you have a market for people within the creative space that need these things to make other things. Like they need this to make the next ad for a Caribbean bottling company, or they need this to make the next ad for Heineken or for Collect or for whatever it is. But now we have the assets right here, and we can kind of keep the money circling within our communities without having to outsource and go somewhere else to get the same, if not better quality.
Yeah. Man, you just expanded my $100 billion. Keep going and going and going in my head in some place. How much billions we could really make if we made ourselves intentional thought. So you sent me some pictures, some videos, and the like. Which would you like to share?
Any or all. I think the paintings are the most recent, and some of them you could see in the back of me that I'm still working on. But yeah, I've been working on paintings that have a lot to do with sleep, and how I think we can relate that there's a little bit of an intimacy with sleep. So there's one part of the series kind of came to mind because I always felt the ways about, people take photos of you while you're sleeping or you fall asleep somewhere. And, it's like a ha-ha funny kind of thing. But I wondered, like, what about that? One, is funny, or two, like, why would that make someone uncomfortable if there isn't something intimate about the sleeping process? And also, there's, I think, levels of shared experience of a lot of Bahamians have to, share spaces and occupy space with a lot of people, So, you're in a shared space, you're sleeping in the same room. Like, what are the intimacies of being able to sleep in the same space with someone and all of these things? What about the culture of losing sleep in the vein of, hustling to make sure you get the next dollar. Like there's a pride and, I stayed up till 2 o'clock working on this thing, like what are all of these elements of sleep on the sleep cycle that we kind of take for granted that are important to other areas of our lives.
Cool. I was trying to find why I'm not seeing all the pictures, but and then you have some animations here of some of the. I guess this is some of your first works.
Yeah.
Along areas of the Western Front, they sang carols, exchanged gifts, took photographs, and played football. They also took time to bury casualties and repair trenches. Though the war, Edward declared, "I have found it impossible to carry on the heavy burden of responsibility without the help and support of the woman I love." His decision came after the British government, the public, and the church condemned his decision to marry Mrs. Wallace Simpson, a twice-divorced American. He understood that love, not possessions or status, is life's greatest treasure. That in December of 1968, Apollo 8 was the first manned mission to the moon. Its crew entered into orbit around the moon on Christmas Eve, making it the first manned spacecraft to do so. It orbited 10 times, taking incredible images of the moon and Earth before returning to Earth. In modern times, we continue to marvel at the exploration of the seemingly final frontier.
Yeah, this was part of what we did with Dion for Adventures in the Arts, where he's also doing something very innovative in terms of providing what we call an edutainment experience that introduces Bahamians to how the arts are connected in all the ways, through music and through visuals, through food. So you get to experience something that's entertaining, but you also get to learn as you go through. So this would have been the first time we ventured into trying animation, and I thought this would be a good time to get my feet wet in seeing what can be done or what I am capable of and what I would need to learn to continue to grow it and blossom it into something different. So this was my first time doing animations, and those were what they call they're hand rendered. So each frame I drew individually. So for just a minute worth of content, that's about, how many seconds is that? That's about 60. So that's 60 drawings to give you a minute. And each of those is about 3 to 4 minutes long. So you have to draw each individual frame by hand. So that's frame by frame animating, which gives you the fidelity to create a lot of very interesting and very fluid images because you have control over each individual frame. But as you can tell, it's very time consuming because, like I said, to get a minute's worth of content, you have to draw something 60 times, So again, it goes to the point that we talked about earlier of being patient and giving time to the artist to create the work, because it's a labor of love in the sense that you're giving a lot of yourself to make something, and to rush it is at the expense of the quality and the excellence of the thing, So yeah, I'm very excited to see, where it goes from here. I also have a lot of friends that have gone to school to start doing animation and bring things back. I have another friend that is making his own game right now. So there's a lot of things that are happening that might not be super public knowledge, but it's still happening, and the humans are doing their thing. So I think that in the next 10 to 20 years, you'd be surprised what starts to come out of the Bahamas as far as the orange community is concerned.
Awesome. That's very promising, and because we have to find ways to tap in, because the Cylinder era created a lot of millionaires, and it seemed like after he left the scene, we stopped making millionaires, intentionally making millionaires. We made those who buck up through some industry or whatever, but they might have been intentional in what they were doing, but I don't think from a nation-wide it was intentional to create them as millionaires, whether it's the energy industry or it was gambling or what all them different things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good that we created them because now they could use their dollars to help advance and expand us, the rest of us who didn't have that opportunity or those gifts to do what they do.
Yeah.
Right? So my favorite question for the day. For the young Bahamians watching tonight, what one rainmaker opportunity they can pursue right now to turn their creativity into enterprise and help build a new business environment?
I think, taking advantage of the digital market. A lot of people won't know what you're capable of unless they see it, and the reality of, investment and all these other things is that, people want to see what they're investing in. So to a large degree, you kind of have to be willing to put yourself out there or to, even do something while you're scared, because you open yourself up to being noticed and being in the room. And I don't want that to be mistaken by you kind of do everything or offer all your services for the payment of exposure.
Right.
Because a lot of people like to use that as a way to kind of get free work out of you. But it's to use the free things that you have access to, like your social media pages and like your TikToks or the like, to get your work out there and get eyes on it, and to use that as the playground and the testing ground for things to happen. Because again, you'd be surprised who's looking, and to also be intentional about what it is that you want to do. So if it's like, you want to get involved in the comic industry, then the work that you're putting out there should be catered to that kind of style or design or whatever it is. So, if you want to work with a Junkuna group, then put that out there. Like, make your costumes, post your costumes, do your things, and you'd be surprised who's looking or who's watching or who's connected. This island only so big. And beyond just that, but, even talking about internationally, like you want to work on the next Marvel movie or be a concept designer for all these things, then look to see what's out there and what this kind of company or this entity is looking for, and do your best to produce work that would align you with that thing, and just continue to use that to your advantage. Stand your ground. Don't be afraid to, say that, you want to be compensated for your skill set. I think we have a bit of an unusual culture here where, because everybody is family to somebody else, everybody want to break, and, eventually only so much breaks could get you so far. You still need to be able to eat at the end of the day. So,
they want to break, but they won't give you no break.
All right. So, don't be afraid to stand your ground, and that, you want to be compensated for what it is that you're doing. And, I think that's about it.
That's awesome stuff, right? Because we talk a lot about the actual creatives, the artists, etc. But in this space, there's also, like you said, the support services, and so we could grow this whole thing and be big. And like my brother always says, and he was on the show last, and he talked about it, and he says, business isn't about selling what you want to sell; it's about selling what people want or need to solve a solution. And so I would suggest to the public, go out and find what is the need in the orange economy if you're not an artist itself, and then work on providing whatever skills you have, provide to solve that need. And that'd be awesome. So we'd like to thank you kindly for taking the time of sharing all this nuggets and knowledge that you have and sharing it with all the listeners and watchers out there. And so we wish you all of the best in your endeavors as you move forward. And we're looking forward to this short movie that we bring you back on to show in this animation, because another snippet that I saw from Dion's launch, you got some serious talent, right? And
Thank you.
we appreciate that. And I look forward to not just having to dig up your information, but to see it last where everybody, be like DJ Overdose those when they just went kaboom, and everybody like, okay, we can't get enough of Jevon.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Cool. All right, so till next week, next time, we appreciate for you, and we'll be in touch with you shortly.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, folks, you've been watching Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. And what we'd like you to do now is to say tonight we talked about the creative power. The idea that one person can transform a space, and together we can elevate a community, identifying our gifts, skills, creative spark, and develop it. Because when Bahamians' creativity becomes enterprise, one man can transform one block, and together we can develop our nation into the new built environment. If tonight's conversation meant something to you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment or two in the chat, telling us what you think Something to Think About meant to you tonight. Until next time, we want you to pause, think about it with intentional thought, and consider where we go from here. And you will bring value to the table of national development.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative 242